Hello, my name is Joe Vasta. Today we're going to talk about numbers and the cross. Chuck Missler brought this topic to my attention. Let's get going. Jacob is a man from the Old Testament who had 12 sons. Each of those sons became the founders of the 12 tribes of Israel. Joseph is one of those sons. Joseph had two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Jacob adopted Manasseh and Ephraim to share in the inheritance with his sons. With the tribe of Joseph in two parts, we have an alphabet of 14 names to choose from. Often you'll see 12 tribes of Israel listed out in the Bible. Each time, two of the 14 names are left out. Sometimes Dan is left out. Sometimes Levi is left out. The Levites were exempt from military duties. So Levi is left out when the tribes are being listed for military march. The 12 tribes are listed several times in the Old Testament and one time in Revelation 7, and in different orders too. What you see now is the first chapter of the book of Numbers. This chapter has the numbering of the tribes, men 20 and over and able to go to war. Let's go ahead and put those numbers in red. If you stare long enough at chapter 1, you'll notice those 14 names that we talked about earlier. Let's go ahead and highlight them. The green names are the 12 tribes that are supposed to be numbered. Joseph and Levi do not have numbers. Joseph is not numbered because his children, Ephraim and Manasseh, have the numbers, and Levi was not supposed to be numbered. We see our alphabet of 14 names, and we're going to list the numbers from chapter 1 on the right. That list does not contain Joseph or Levi. Let's focus on these 12 tribes. These 12 tribes were grouped into 4 camps. Reuben, Simeon, and Gad were called Camp Reuben. You also had Camp Judah, Camp Ephraim, and Camp Dan. Let's put the total numbers for each camp on this diagram. Now, the nation of Israel was wandering in the wilderness after getting out of Egypt, and they would set up camp and put the tabernacle in the middle. The tabernacle represents the throne of God. The tribe of Levi would enclose the tabernacle. Remember, Levi was not numbered in chapter 1. The 4 camps would surround the tribe of Levi. Camp Reuben was to the south, Camp Judah, east, Camp Ephraim, west, and Camp Dan, north. Let's set up camp now. I went ahead and put north to the right instead of up. We'll see why I did that shortly. Let's put the tabernacle in the middle. The tribe of Levi surrounds the tabernacle. Camp Judah is to the east, so let's set up a tent. But wait a minute, there's something wrong with where I put that tent. It is not directly to the east, so let's get rid of it. If we are going to follow the letter of the law, then Camp Judah goes due east without being wider than the camp of Levi. Camp Judah would have to extend eastward to comply with the biblical instructions, not southeast, not northeast. Camp Reuben is on the south, Camp Ephraim to the west, and Camp Dan to the north. We're going to assume that the Levite square was a basic unit, like 100 feet on one side or something like that. We'll also approximate the size of each camp to determine the relative length as each stretches out in its cardinal direction. Let's take a look at the camp of Israel from above. If the rising sun was a person, what would it see if it faced the camp? This is amazing. A cross in the Old Testament. Jesus died on the cross to save people from their sins. And that happened in the New Testament. This discovery is not a proof that the Bible is true or that God exists, but this is something very fascinating. It illustrates the fact that the Old Testament points to Jesus. Whether it's this cross in the book of Numbers, or whether it's the prophecies of Jesus' first and second comings from Genesis to Malachi, or possible Christophanies in the Old Testament. A Christophany is a pre-incarnate version of Christ. A possible Christophany in the Old Testament would be the Son of God in the fiery furnace in the book of Daniel. Another way the Old Testament points to Jesus happens to be examples of Old Testament individuals as types foreshadowing Christ. One example is Joseph in the book of Genesis. This list shows similarities between Joseph and Jesus, and I just picked 10 of them. Another example of Old Testament types foreshadowing Christ is Boaz, the kinsman redeemer in the book of Ruth. Let's end this presentation with the theorems of Christianity. You might be thinking, what do Christians believe? What is Christianity in a nutshell? Well, here's 4 theorems. Theorem 1, all have sinned. Theorem 2, the wages of sin is death. This is because God is just and perfect. Theorem 3, Jesus died on the cross for our sins and rose from the dead. And theorem 4, whoever believes in Jesus will not perish, but have everlasting life. Believing in Jesus is putting your trust in Jesus, believing theorems 1, 2, and 3, and that is how one is saved. Salvation is not based on works. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.